all the holes have been drilled, countersunk, and we're ready to move on to the next step. Since I have good flat bar stock that I buy from a steel distributor that specifically makes steel for knives, I know that this is perfectly flat as is. Every once in a while it might be a little warp or something here and there, but with this thick stock it's normally really spot on. So if you're working with a file or something else, I would highly suggest flattening your blade before you do this, preferably with a surface grinder or the proper tool, but I don't have one of those either, so that's why I spend money on steel. This granite here is perfectly flat. This is the only purpose for this behemoth of a rock thing that I gotta lug around with me everywhere I go when I move the shop. I can tell that it's flat because there is no wobble, and if I had a light I could shine it underneath here and show through the camera that there's no light coming through on the back side of the spine. But I know it's flat, so you just gotta believe me. Our next step is to darken the blade area. I like machinist blue or a paint marker. Which one do I like better? Whichever one is closest. The tool for this, which I'm going to show you, are these drill bits. I do have this fancy thing set up. It works. You don't need to have that. I honestly think this works better. So, 1/4 inch drill bit, 1/4 inch knife. If I were to affix this and run the blade, I would get a perfect line right down the middle of the blade. That way I know where my center edge is. However, we've not heat treated this yet, so you don't want a center line. We're going to use a 3/16, which if you're good at math, that'll leave us a nice thick scribe line down the middle of the blade, so when I go to heat treat I don't have a ridiculously thin edge that's going to warp and ruin the knife. So just for demonstration purposes, I should have this clamped or something, but we're just going to kind of pull this along. One stroke is best, unless you got to do something, the more accurate it's going to be. Okay. And what that did was left us about 1/8 of an inch or so down the middle of the blade, and what we're going to do next is just do our best to keep that even and grind that down and get it ready to go in the kiln. So the next step that we're going to do, we're actually going to start grinding the profiles of the blade out, and we're going to do that by initiating the ricasso on this particular knife. I have this one that's already pre-ground out to just show you. It's a ricasso is the flat area where the tang meets the bevels of the blade. This is one of the more crucial spots because if you get it really nice and flat and perfect, your knife's going to look really nice and perfect too. There are plenty of people who will just grip it and rip it on the grinder. This is the one place I use kind of a jig. I have, let's show you the big one first. Very simple. It's 2 bars, 2 Allen keys, one side's tapped, one side's loose. The blade slips in, I clamp it down here, and then wherever this goes, the edge follows. Wherever this is, the ricasso stays. So, big knife, big ricasso, guard, or jig. This is the first one I've ever had. This was just some junk steel I made. It doesn't have to be nice. They do make and sell really, really awesome ones. I've had this for 3-4 years and never needed another one. It's not flat, but my plate is. So as long as this stops, it gets it close enough that, I don't know, you'd have to really look at it with a microscope to be picking out any kind of flaws. So, you can also adjust your angle if you wanted to just have a nice flat, nothing fancy kind of thing going on. It sure would be easy to grind. It will click on there really easily. But I like to kind of give it a slant in one direction or another. I think it adds a little bit of style points to the blade. So just kind of eyeball it on there. A little twist here and there, and she's locked in. So I'm only going to use this to set the initial bevel, and then once I have that, I'm going to take it off. It kind of gets in the way with bigger blades, but if you're working with something that's only this big, this guard actually gives you something really nice to hold on to while you're grinding the blade. But like I said, this one big enough to hold on to, I'm not going to need this for very much. The first step is going to be breaking the bevels, and what that means is we're not going to initially put this on here and come out with a full height grind on it. I'm going to get right up to my center line, and this is before we heat treat it, so I'm going to have to grind this all over again. The better of a job you do this first one, the better a track you've laid for yourself in the future. So it's not the most important part, but don't screw it up because it's going to make more work down the line. So I'm going to start with a kind of a used belt. I don't want to use a fresh one because I'll just chip all of the abrasive off on this first cut with these hard corners. And we're going to grind the final part like at a almost flat, 5 degree, whatever angle that is going to be. And initially, to just get right to our center line, I'm going to hit it at like, I don't know, a 45 degree angle, whatever, very steep angle, and I'm just going to cut right down to my line, and we will fast forward the boring parts. So what we're left with after just a few minutes of quick grinding with something really, really, really aggressive, I'm left with a thinned out edge, which is going to be thin enough to lose all its temperature during the quench, which means the steel will get hard, but not so thin that it will either cool off before it can get to the quench and therefore not harden, or worse yet, we'll get an S-curve down the blade if it's too thin, and that sucks because you did all your work and ruined it at the end of the quench. So now that we've got our initial 90s broken, you can still see it's super duper thick and chunky. I'm going to actually draw this line back towards the spine, and it will get closer to looking like a finished blade here real fast. I'm not going to waste your time watching me grind this for the next 2 hours because that's probably how long it's going to take. I will tell you that this is an old 36 grit belt. From here on out I'm going to be using a brand new ceramic 36 grit belt. New belt gives you clean lines every single time you cut, so always use a new belt. I'm not going to start at the edge and work my way with this flat line here. I'm not going to pull that all the way back. What I'm going to do is actually start cutting the ridge here. So if you can kind of imagine, we got a pyramid built. We're going to cut the edge of the pyramid off, and then I'm going to do that until I can no longer see any gaps to my edge on the grinder. So by that point, my line should be further back to about there, almost like a ½ inch or so. And at that point, I'm going to be done with that. I'll hit the next peak and hit the next peak, and by that time what we're doing is drawing that initial grind all the way back, but I'm staying away from the edge. I'll never ever grind deeper into my edge as long as I hit just the peak of the high spot. And plus, hitting the peak means you're grinding less material at one time, which is a faster grind, cleaner lines, less work, less heat, less everything. Alright, so I'm going to go fast forward again and we'll actually get a profile on the blade. This is the only part of the process that I can't verbally explain very well. Just keep an eye on the stroke. I like to tuck my arms in and basically get on my gut as much as I can and push into it. I do like the lamp. I don't know if you can see this. I move the lamp with my chest, and that stiff, I don't know, scrunchy arm thing really helps kind of give you something to lean into. So I'm gonna do this with this brand new belt. Keep an eye on how I'm grinding. I can't really explain the 6 axes that you're controlling all at the same time while this chainsaw style belt whizzes around your knuckles and shoots fire everywhere. It's kind of a process. So there are many other people to watch on YouTube. Sean Hatcher at Hatcher Knives is one of, I think, the best grinders you're ever going to see. He's got a good channel full of videos of him just standing there grinding this stuff forever, and if you're not watching that, you're not learning how to do this. So I'm going to do this quick, and I'll show you the before and after, and hopefully not bore you to death with the rest of this video. Alright, so here's the first finished profile. The slanted ricasso guard gave us a really cool slanted spine line. And if you can kind of see here on the tip, I'll just rotate it. I can't see the camera, so hopefully you can see a tiny little bit of a highlight right here where I still have another bevel, which was the initial bevel that we put on here, the corner breaker. I can see a tiny little bit of a highlight right here where I didn't get all the way to my center line, and that's what I'm looking for when I'm grinding. A good light will give you a nice reflection where there's a different angle because the scratches are catching light in a different manner. So once you grind till you don't see, there's a tiny little highlight here, whatever. We'll get up to that later. But towards the end process and the cleanup grinding, when we get into the bigger grits, like that's crucial. That tiny little highlight you made from your first bevel is your indicator of how much more you have to grind on that one area. So it's a little hard to see where we're even here until we start going the other side. So I'm going to do the other side. You're not going to see that. We'll come back to the knife cleaned up. I'll do this on the 36 again on the other side, and then we'll do a 120, and you'll come back and see us after that part. So all the 120 grinding has been done for right now. There's still a lot of work to go. We gotta do something about the tang. We're gonna taper that. Tip's pretty thick, which is a good thing for where we're at in the process. It's a small area, can lose heat really fast, so we want to keep it kind of fat before we put it through the quench. Took the grinds all the way up to the spine. Just a basic flat grind. We are going to go back and drag the ricasso back into this chole. It's still a little fat right here, but that's on purpose. If you can see these little imperfections along the ricasso, we'll zoom in on that. Looks pretty bad up in the corner there. I had a slip, sorry. But that's alright for right now because, like I said, we're going to draw that back at least another 1/8 of an inch. Get rid of it. So at this point, we've gone from bar stock with a template on it to a blank. Right now this is a blank. It's worthless. It's bar steel. It's got some grinds on it. That's about it. This is the original old rusty. That is some Built Sharp classic right there. Lots of mistakes. Look at that 90-degree corner in there. Jesus. What was I thinking? I mean, not the nicest knife I've ever made in my life, but we use that one every single day. And we decided to rehash it and don't have a hunting knife style in the inventory currently. Unless you know, hunting zombies. So, next step is we're going to clay it up and run it through the forge, and when it comes out it's going to be this golden, rusty, yellowy blue kind of on the inside color. This is what it looks like when it comes out of the tempering process. It looks like hell. It'll clean up real purty afterwards, I promise. This one is our little EDC. This is a couple steps down the road so far. The swedge and The compound grinds on the blade are finished. There's some jimping and the lanyard stuff. That one's on the bench ready to get glued up. We're going to be there with this one by tomorrow.